911, this is an emergency. She's carrying classified files. I can see the government seals on those boxes. The shrill voice cut through the quiet Saturday morning like a siren of its own. I froze on the porch, one hand steadying the moving dolly, the other gripping a box marked in thick black letters. VA Records. Casework. It wasn't me they were calling about. It was my wife, Sophia. She stood beside the open trunk of our SUV, arms wrapped around another cardboard box, her hair pulled back, a few strands stuck to her cheek from the September breeze. She had carried heavier loads in her life. I knew that. 20 years in uniform had given her that calm strength. Still, even she looked puzzled when the voice of Leah Gray, our brand new HOA president, shrieked across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked out from their blinds. A few, braver or nosier than the rest, stepped onto their porches. Phones came up, recording. The familiar hum of gossip spread before I could even set the dolly down. Sophia adjusted her grip on the box and gave me a small shake of her head. That was her way of saying, don't rise to it, not yet. But Leah wasn't done. She marched to the end of her driveway, cell phone pressed to her ear, her other hand pointing like a spear toward my wife. Yes, officer, right now, she's moving classified government documents into her house. I know what I saw. Official seals, top secret. You better get here fast before she hides them. My stomach dropped. We had lived in Willow Creek for 3 weeks, 3 quiet weeks. We had waved at neighbors, mowed our lawn, even baked a pie for the Dawson family next door. And now, this circus. The wail of a siren answered Leah's hysteria. A sheriff's cruiser rounded the corner, lights flashing against the tidy brick homes and neatly trimmed hedges. The neighborhood held its breath. Sophia set the box down gently on the porch. She straightened, squared her shoulders, and waited. That calm again. The same calm she had in the years I'd watched her prepare for deployment. The deputy stepped out, a tall man with sandy hair and mirrored sunglasses. His hand hovered near his belt, not quite on the holster, but close enough. He scanned the scene, then looked from Leah to Sophia, back again. Leah pounced. That's her! She's the one! Look at those boxes. Evidence of something illegal, I'm sure of it. You need to search her house immediately. The deputy's eyes landed on Sophia. Something changed in his posture. He tugged off his sunglasses, blinked once, then twice. Major Bowman, ma'am, his voice carried across the yard. And then, in front of the whole neighborhood, in front of Leah with her mouth hanging open and her phone still glued to her ear, the deputy sheriff snapped to attention and saluted my wife. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones shook as neighbors tried to keep recording, realizing they had just caught something they didn't understand but couldn't look away from. Sophia returned the salute, crisp, measured, the kind of salute that doesn't fade, even years after you hang up the uniform. Leah's jaw worked soundlessly. For the first time since we'd moved in, she had nothing to say. I took a step forward, laid my hand on the box labeled VA Records, and spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. Welcome to Willow Creek, honey. Looks like we've made an impression. The deputy lowered his hand, gave Sophia a nod of respect, and turned to Leah. His tone was flat, official, but edged with something colder. Ma'am, I suggest you put that phone away, now. The cul-de-sac was silent. Only the wind moved, rustling the flags on our mailboxes. And just like that, the war with Leah Gray had begun. After that salute, Willow Creek was never the same. On the surface, things quieted down. Neighbors trimmed their lawns, kids rode their bikes, sprinklers ticked in the evenings. But I could feel it, like static in the air before a storm. Leah Gray might have gone silent in that moment, but silence from someone like her didn't mean surrender. It meant she was planning her next move. Sophia carried on with her work. Every night, after supper, she'd disappear into the study. The desk light would burn late, shining over stacks of government folders and thick case files. I'd bring her a cup of tea, stand in the doorway, and watch her type with steady, measured strokes. That night, I saw a name on the screen. Bold letters, underlined, as if it carried its own weight. Diego Morgan. The sound of it stopped me. I frowned. Morgan? That name rings a bell. Sophia looked up. For a moment she hesitated. Then she nodded. Diego Morgan was Leah's husband. The air in the room grew heavy. I leaned closer. You're telling me you're handling his case? She lowered her voice. His death benefits, yes. It landed on my desk at the VA. And Dean, she paused, steadying herself. Things don't add up, not at all. I remembered Leah's hysteria, screaming into her phone about classified files, government seals, danger. She hadn't been afraid of the boxes. She had been afraid of what those boxes contained. The next morning, as I collected the mail, Leah was standing on her porch across the street. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just watched me, eyes sharp, lips pressed tight, like she was daring me to look away first. Later that day, Harold Dawson came by. He carried a folder under his arm. HOA financial records. Harold wasn't just treasurer, he was also a reserve officer, a man who believed in order, in numbers that told the truth. Dean, he said, his voice low, there's something you ought to know. 3 years' worth of contracts, landscaping, maintenance, all signed by Leah. Prices doubled, no bidding, the money, it's gone. And here's the kicker. Those payouts line up almost exactly with the time she collected Diego's life insurance. I flipped through the papers. Even to my untrained eye, it was clear. Leah had turned the HOA into her personal wallet. That night, Sophia closed the file on her desk, her hand resting on the cover where Diego's name was stamped. She met my eyes. Her voice was calm, but her gaze carried the weight of everything she knew. Dean, she said, I don't think Leah just stole from the HOA. I think she stole from the government, from the very memory of a soldier. I nodded slowly. The words sank deep. Leah Gray wasn't just a loud neighbor with too much time on her hands. She was sitting on a secret, one she would do anything to keep buried. If Willow Creek had a heartbeat, it was the monthly HOA meeting. The little clubhouse sat at the center of our development. Beige siding, faded green shutters, a cracked parking lot where the asphalt buckled in the summer heat. Inside, though, was where the real theater happened. Neighbors argued about grass height, mailbox paint, and where to place the Christmas lights. It was supposed to be boring, supposed to be harmless. But once Harold laid those papers in front of me, I started to see the HOA in a different light. It wasn't a harmless shell, it was a vault, and Leah Gray had the only key. That Thursday evening, I walked in with Sophia at my side. The room smelled of burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. A dozen folding chairs lined up in 2 crooked rows. Leah sat at the front table, clipboard in hand, wearing that pinched smile she saved for when she thought she was untouchable. Neighbors trickled in. The Dawsons, the Bennetts, Mrs. Carlson with her yappy terrier in a purse. Most of them avoided our eyes. After all, rumors had been flying ever since Leah's 911 stunt. Some believed Sophia worked for a shadowy federal office. Others thought we'd brought trouble with us when we moved in. Either way, people whispered, and Leah enjoyed every second of it. Harold cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began the treasurer's report. His voice was steady, but I knew him well enough to hear the tension underneath. Landscaping expenses this quarter, $32,600. Tree trimming, $14,000 even. Pest control, $9,200. He let the numbers hang in the stale air. Mrs. Bennett frowned. That seems high. Didn't we spend less last year? Harold glanced at Leah, then back to the crowd. We did. Considerably less. Leah's smile tightened. She tapped her pen against the clipboard. Costs are up everywhere. Inflation, you all know that. Harold set down his papers, slow and deliberate. Inflation doesn't double contracts. Inflation doesn't cancel competitive bids. He looked straight at her. But signatures do, yours. The room shifted. Chairs squeaked. Someone coughed. I watched Leah's face. She didn't flinch, not outwardly, but her jaw tightened, and her knuckles went white around the pen. That's enough, Harold, she said. Her voice was sharp, brittle. You're out of line. But Harold wasn't finished. He pulled out one more sheet, held it high so everyone could see. 3 years, same vendors, same inflated rates. And yet, the money trails lead nowhere. Bank records show withdrawals that don't match deposits. Funds are missing, and every authorization, every single one, has your name on it. A low murmur rolled through the room. People leaned toward each other, whispering. Mrs. Carlson clutched her terrier a little tighter. Leah slammed her pen down. You think you're some kind of detective? I've done everything by the book. If you don't like the way I run this community, you can find somewhere else to live. Her eyes darted toward Sophia, then toward me. A flash of something, fear, anger, crossed her face. I leaned back, arms crossed, letting Harold take the floor. He was calm, he was measured, and he had her cornered. "This community isn't your wallet, Leah," he said firmly. "We deserve answers." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was louder than any argument. Finally, Mrs. Bennett whispered, "Where did the money go?" Leah forced the smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Repairs, maintenance, emergency funds. You wouldn't understand the paperwork." But I understood, and so did Sophia. That look on Leah's face wasn't confidence. It was desperation, barely disguised. Later that night, as we walked home under the yellow glow of the street lamps, Sophia said quietly, "She's bleeding money. The HOA is her cover. But Dean," she paused, her voice dropping, "it's not just about neighborhood dues. It ties back to Diego's file. I can feel it." I squeezed her hand, staring at the rows of perfect houses, their windows glowing soft in the dark. To anyone else, Willow Creek looked peaceful, but I knew better. Leah Gray wasn't just mismanaging an HOA, she was running a con. And if Harold was right, the walls of that shell were about to crack wide open. It didn't take long for Leah to strike back. The very next week, I noticed flyers tucked under doormats, slid into mail slots, even taped to the community mailbox. Same cheap paper, same bold headline, "Do you know who your neighbors really are?" The words sent a chill through me. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo of Sophia, cropped from who knows where, carrying a box up our front steps. The caption read, "Federal surveillance, military investigations, classified secrets." My fists tightened around the paper. Sophia took it from me, read it once, then set it down on the kitchen counter without a word. She poured herself a glass of water, calm as ever, but I saw the muscle twitch in her jaw. "She's trying to isolate us," I said. "She's trying to scare us," Sophia corrected. "There's a difference." By that evening, the rumors had already spread like wildfire. I overheard whispers at the grocery store, in the line at the post office. One neighbor crossed the street rather than walk past me. Another, someone I'd shared coffee with just days earlier, kept his head down and pretended not to see me at all. Leah's smear campaign was working. The next HOA email blast made things worse. Sent from the official account, it read, "Certain residents may be involved in activities outside the scope of our community values. Please remain vigilant. If you notice unusual behavior, late-night visitors, excessive paperwork, government vehicles, report immediately to HOA leadership." No names were mentioned. None had to be. Everyone knew who Leah meant. That night, Sophia sat at her desk, flipping through Diego's file. Her eyes were shadowed, but her voice was steady. "She thinks if she paints me as a threat, the neighborhood won't question her books. It's a distraction. Classic misdirection." I watched her, proud and angry all at once. Proud that she wouldn't let Leah rattle her. Angry that a woman could weaponize gossip to protect her lies. But Leah wasn't finished. 2 days later, I found a manila envelope on our porch. Inside, printed screenshots of old service records, some redacted, some doctored. Across the top of the page, written in thick black marker, "How much does your wife really tell you?" I carried it inside, tossed it onto the table, and stared at Sophia. She met my gaze without flinching. "She's fishing," Sophia said quietly, "trying to break us from the inside." "Not gonna happen," I told her, and I meant it. Still, the pressure grew. A couple of neighbors stopped inviting us to block parties. Parents pulled their kids inside when we walked past. The neighborhood that had looked so warm and welcoming when we first arrived now felt like a stage set, bright facades hiding suspicion in every shadow, but there were cracks in Leah's control. One evening, Harold showed up with a flash drive. "Dean," he said, lowering his voice, "you need to see this." On the drive were emails between Leah and a contractor. The contractor complained about inflated invoices. Leah's reply was blunt. "Just process it, no questions. The funds are covered." Covered by what? By whom? The evidence was mounting, but so were the lies. Leah's smear campaign had bought her time, maybe even sympathy from those too frightened to question her. That night, as Sophia locked up her files, she said softly, "She's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." I stood at the window, looking across the street. Leah's porch light burned late into the night. Her silhouette moved back and forth, restless, pacing like a trapped animal. "She's not done with us," I said. Sophia came to stand beside me. "No," she agreed, her voice calm, almost cold. "She's just getting started." And in that silence, with the whole neighborhood caught between whispers and lies, I realized something. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. Leah was fighting for her survival, and she'd drag the whole community down before she let the truth surface. The boxes sat in our study like silent witnesses. Stacked too high, marked with black stencils and VA seals, they seemed ordinary to anyone else. But to Leah Gray, they were the ticking clock on her whole charade. Sophia opened one of them late on a Tuesday night. I was in the living room, half listening to the evening news, when I heard her call my name. "Dean, come here. You need to see this." I stepped into the study. Papers were spread across the desk, each page covered in neat type, some with handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. At the top of one form, "Treatment denied, PTSD therapy." Sophia tapped at the paper with her finger. According to this, Diego refused treatment, denied it outright. "Okay," I said slowly, not sure where she was headed. She pulled out a letter from another folder, a personal letter, written in shaky but determined handwriting, signed by Diego himself. The words cut deep. "The therapy is helping. For the first time in years, I feel like I can see a way forward. I'm starting to believe I can come home whole." I looked from the letter to the form, back again. My stomach tightened. One says he refused treatment, the other says he was improving with it. Sophia nodded. "Exactly. Someone altered his records. Someone erased his progress." The room felt smaller, heavier. Outside, the crickets chirped in steady rhythm, but inside, the silence pressed in. "Leah," I whispered. Sophia didn't answer right away. She stacked the pages, lining them up with surgical precision. If his treatment was recorded as successful, the payout would have been delayed, possibly reduced. But if it looked like he refused therapy, if it looked like he was beyond help, the insurance processed faster, no questions asked. I sank into the chair across from her. "You're saying she faked his refusal. She stole from the government." Sophia's voice dropped. "Not just the government, Dean. She stole his memory. She turned his fight to heal into a lie, just to cash a check." I stared at the papers, at Diego's uneven signature on the letter, at the cold stamp of denied. Rage simmered in my chest, hot and sharp. "She can't bury this," I said. "Not anymore." Sophia gave me a look, part warning, part resolve. "Then we'll need proof. More than this, we'll need to show a pattern." Later that week, she pulled another file from the box. This one was a progress report from Diego's therapist, dated just weeks before his death. The report noted measurable improvement, positive response to sessions, and recommendation for continued treatment. But the copy in the official VA record, that same report had been doctored, whole lines crossed out, sentences replaced. The signature at the bottom looked off. "Forgery," Sophia said simply, "and not a very good one." I rubbed my temples. The picture was coming into focus. Diego's real story had been rewritten, piece by piece, until it told the version Leah needed. That night, as I carried the trash out, I caught movement across the street. Leah's curtains twitched shut. Too fast to be casual. She had been watching, always watching. When I came back in, Sophia was still at the desk, the evidence spread like a battlefield before her. She looked up, her eyes tired but determined. "These boxes," she said, "are her undoing. Every document she touched left fingerprints, literal or otherwise. We just need to show the world." I walked over, set my hands on her shoulders, and squeezed gently. "Then let's do it. Let's finish what Diego started." For the first time in weeks, a small smile crossed her face. Not joy, not relief, something stronger, resolve. And as I turned off the study light, leaving the boxes stacked neatly in the shadows, I knew Leah was right about one thing. Those boxes were dangerous. Not because they held secrets, but because they held the truth. It started with a noise, not loud, just enough to cut through the quiet of our backyard. A faint rustle, a quick scrape against the fence. I set down my glass of iced tea, muted the television, and listened. Nothing. Then again, softer this time. I stepped into the hallway. Sophia was at her desk, the glow of the desk lamp spilling across Diego's file. "Did you hear that?" I asked. She looked up, brow furrowed. "Hear what?" That's when the camera pinged my phone. Motion detected. I opened the app, thumb shaking just a little, and there they were. Grainy footage, black and white. Two figures moving slow through the yard. One tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a ball cap. The other shorter, hunched, familiar, even in silhouette. Leah Gray. My jaw clenched. I couldn't believe it. The HOA president herself, creeping through my property in the dead of night. Sophia came to stand beside me, staring at the screen. Her voice was steady, almost too calm. "She's looking for the boxes." The taller man reached the porch. Leah pointed toward the study window. Her hands moved fast, sharp gestures, like she was directing traffic. He nodded, then pulled something from his pocket, a small crowbar. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. "That's breaking and entering." Sophia didn't flinch. She slipped her phone into her pocket and reached for her jacket. "Don't call it in yet," she said. "Not until we have more." "More?" I could barely keep my voice down. "We've got them on camera." But Sophia shook her head. "We need them to expose themselves completely. One broken lock isn't enough. We need intent. We need proof." So we watched, silent, waiting. Leah crouched near the porch steps, whispering to the man. He tried the door, tugged once, twice. Then he muttered something I couldn't hear and shook his head. Leah's frustration showed clear even through the fuzzy feed. She slapped her hand against the railing, then gestured toward the side gate. The man moved that way. Leah followed, casting one nervous glance over her shoulder, toward our window, toward us. For a second, I thought she saw me, but then she turned and vanished into the dark. Sophia exhaled slowly. She's not going to stop. Not until she gets what she thinks is in those boxes. I lowered the phone, heart still pounding. "So, what do we do?" She looked at me, eyes sharp, unwavering. We set the trap, and we let her walk right into it. The next morning, Harold came by. We showed him the footage, the grainy silhouettes creeping through our yard. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and gave a low whistle. "Broke the first rule of crooks," he said. "Never let yourself get caught on camera." He tapped the screen with one thick finger. This is leverage. But Sophia's right. It's not enough to nail her." "What do you suggest?" I asked. Harold's mouth pulled into a thin smile. "We let her come again. Only next time, we'll be waiting." The plan was simple, but it carried weight. We'd secure the boxes, keep the real files locked safe, and plant decoys where Leah was sure to look. Meanwhile, Harold would coordinate with a deputy he trusted, someone who wouldn't tip off Leah. Sophia's voice was steady, controlled. "We give her just enough rope, and when she takes it, the whole neighborhood will see who she really is." That night, I set the camera feeds to record continuously. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow across the fence. I watched with sharp eyes. Leah had crossed a line, and now she was about to step into her own undoing. The plan began at noon. Sophia spread the decoy files across our dining table, her hands precise, her eyes steady. To anyone else, they looked authentic. Official seals, typed reports, even faded notations. But I knew what they really were. Bait. Every page had been crafted to draw Leah in, each one a mirror of the case she feared most. "Are you sure she'll take it?" I asked, standing at the window, scanning the quiet street. Sophia didn't hesitate. "She can't help herself. She knows she's cornered, Dean. A person like Leah, when desperation sets in, she won't run. She'll lash out. She'll try to erase the evidence." Harold came by that afternoon. He carried his ever-present folder, but this time I noticed something new clipped to his belt, the badge of his reserve officer role, polished until it gleamed. He closed the door behind him and lowered his voice. "I've spoken to Deputy Russell. He'll park 2 blocks away tonight, plain clothes, radio open. If Leah makes her move, we've got it covered." Sophia slid the stack of decoys into a banker's box, then placed it by the front door, where the light from the porch spilled across it at night. A trap disguised as carelessness. By dusk, our house felt like a stage. Every lamp set just so, every shadow intentional. I could feel my pulse in my throat, steady, heavy. At 9 o'clock, I sat in the living room, pretending to read, Max stretched out at my feet. Sophia was upstairs, her desk lamp glowing faintly through the banister rails. The house hummed with silence. Then came the sound, a faint crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate steps. My eyes flicked to the window, movement in the dark. Leah's silhouette, hunched low, clutching something against her chest. I whispered, "She's here." Sophia descended the stairs without a sound. Harold, who had stationed himself in the kitchen, pressed his finger to his radio. "Target moving on the porch." The doorknob rattled once, twice, then clicked. She had a key. Of course she did. The door inched open, her face lit by the glow of the hallway lamp. Sweat glistened on her temple, her breath ragged. She stepped inside, eyes fixed on the banker's box by the door. Her voice cracked in a whisper. I have to fix this before they find out." She dropped to her knees, tore the lid open, and rifled through the papers, pages scattered across the floor as she muttered to herself. "They can't know. Diego's file. It wasn't supposed to exist." Sophia moved then, stepping into the light. Her voice was low, firm. "And yet, here you are, confessing." Leah spun, wild-eyed, clutching one of the pages like it was a lifeline. "You don't understand. They would have cut everything off. The payments, the insurance. I had no choice." Harold stepped out from the kitchen, badge raised. "Leah Gray, you need to stop right there." But she didn't. She tore at the paper, shoving it into her purse, her hands shaking. Diego was never supposed to get treatment. I made sure the records showed denial. I had to. We needed the money. Her words echoed, heavy and raw. From outside came the sound of tires on gravel, Deputy Russell pulling up. The house filled with the wash of headlights. Leah froze, chest heaving, eyes darting from Harold's badge to Sophia's steady stare. For a heartbeat she seemed small, fragile, even. Then her shoulders slumped, and the fight drained out of her. She dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor at her feet. "I just wanted to survive," she whispered. But it got out of control. The front door swung wide, and Russell entered, hand resting on his holster. "I heard enough. Ma'am, you're coming with me." Leah didn't resist when the cuffs clicked around her wrists. She just looked at Sophia, her eyes glassy, hollow, and said, "You don't know what it's like, carrying the weight of someone else's choices." Sophia didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence said it all. As they led Leah out into the night, Harold gathered the scattered papers into a neat stack. He looked at me, his jaw tight. "That's it," he said. She walked herself straight into the confession. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The storm had finally broken, but I had a feeling the thunder wasn't done rolling. The night Leah was taken away, our house felt like a war room after the battle. Papers stacked, notes spread, adrenaline still humming in my veins. But Sophia wasn't finished. Her words were strong, she said quietly, sitting at the dining table. But words can be twisted. We need it in writing. Harold nodded. He had already boxed up the scattered decoys with latex gloves, his officers' discipline steady as stone. "And we'll get it. The DA will want more than an outburst in a dark hallway." The next morning, we gathered again. Sophia laid out a simple plan, a form that looked like a routine administrative closure, bland, harmless, the kind of paper bureaucrats file by the dozen. But beneath the language was the trap. By signing, Leah would admit that she had tampered with records, destroyed documents, and authorized payments under false pretenses. "We'll make it look like the end of her nightmare," Sophia explained. "A settlement, a chance to close Diego's file quietly. She'll be desperate enough to believe it." Harold handled the logistics. He called in a handwriting expert from the county, a man he trusted from years of reserve work. Together they gathered samples, HOA checks, meeting minutes, even signatures on landscaping contracts. Every flourish, every loop of Leah's pen would become part of the case. By noon, the bait was ready. A single document, crisp, official, stamped just enough to look genuine. Harold placed it in a manila envelope. He tapped the edge against the table. "She'll sign it," he said. "People always do when they think it's their way out." That evening, we didn't have to wait long. Leah was released on bond, her face pale, her eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. She walked up our driveway like someone forcing herself through fire. Sophia met her on the porch, calm, collected, as though the last 24 hours had been nothing more than an inconvenient misunderstanding. "Leah," she said gently, "there's still a way to put this behind you. No headlines, no courts. Just closure. Leah's eyes darted between us, desperate and searching. Closure? Sophia slid the envelope across the small table. One signature, and this all disappears. Leah's hands shook as she opened it. She read the words once, twice, her lips moving, then her shoulders sagged. If I sign this, it's over? Sophia's voice was soft, almost sympathetic. It's over. The pen scratched against the paper, each stroke slow and trembling. When she lifted her hand, the page bore her name, clear as day. Harold stepped forward, picked it up with his gloved hand, and slipped it into a protective sleeve. His jaw tightened. That's it. We've got her. Leah blinked, realization dawning too late. Her face twisted. Anger, betrayal, fear all colliding at once. You tricked me. Sophia met her gaze without flinching. No, Leah, you tricked everyone else. This time, you only fooled yourself. Moments later, headlights swept across the porch. Deputy Russell was back, this time with 2 officers. Leah didn't fight. She just stared at the ground as they led her away again, her signature now the nail in her own coffin. Inside, Harold laid the signed confession beside the handwriting samples. The expert compared them, nodding once, firm. It's a match. No doubt about it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift, like a heavy stone lifted off my chest. Sophia closed the case file, her hand resting on Diego's name one last time. Now, she said, it won't just be whispers in the night, it'll be evidence in the daylight. Harold smiled faintly, the kind of smile a man wears when he knows justice has taken root. Tomorrow, he said, we take it to the courthouse, and this time, Leah Gray won't walk away. I looked out the window then. Across the street, her house sat dark and silent, a hollow shell of its former command. For so long, she had ruled this neighborhood with fear, with threats, with a voice that always demanded to be louder than everyone else's. Now, her silence told another story, a story of downfall, of truth catching up no matter how fast you run. And deep down, I knew. The community had finally turned the page. The courthouse in Denver had that smell of old wood and cold marble, equal parts history and judgment. As Sophia and I walked through the doors, Harold at our side, I felt the weight of eyes on us. Not hostile, not suspicious, just watchful. Neighbors had come, veterans, widows, families who had kept their heads down while Leah Gray ran the HOA like a petty kingdom. They filled the benches, shoulder to shoulder, waiting to see if truth would finally win. Leah entered last, flanked by her attorney. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The sharp edges of her voice were gone, her confidence hollowed out. But her eyes still darted, quick and calculating, like a fox searching for one last way out of the trap. When the clerk called her case, the room seemed to hold its breath. The prosecutor rose first, a tall man with a voice like gravel. He wasted no time. He laid out the paper trail. HOA contracts with inflated numbers, checks with Leah's signature, gambling debts traced through bank records. And then the bombshell, the forged VA documents, the denial of PTSD treatment that Diego had never written, but Leah had engineered. Each exhibit hit like a hammer. But it was Maria Morgan who carried the weight of the trial. She walked to the stand with a folder pressed to her chest. Her hands trembled as she took the oath, then steadied when she spoke. My brother Diego, he wasn't perfect, but he was fighting. He was in therapy. He wrote me letters every week. She opened the folder and pulled one out, the paper creased and worn. Her voice cracked as she read, Maria, the nightmares are less now. The doc says I'm making progress. I still see the desert sometimes, but I think maybe I'll get through this. The courtroom was silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Maria lifted her eyes to the jury. Tears glistened, but her voice grew stronger. He believed he was getting better, and then suddenly the record said he was denied treatment, that he'd given up. But that wasn't Diego. That wasn't his handwriting. Leah stole not just his money, she stole his chance at healing. Leah's attorney tried to object, but the damage was done. The jurors saw the letters. They saw Maria's grief. They saw the truth. When it was Leah's turn to speak, she stood shakily. Her words spilled out in fits and starts. I never meant, it wasn't supposed to. She faltered, clutched the railing as though it might hold her up. They told me the money would stop if he kept going to treatment. I had debts. I had nowhere else to turn. Her attorney tugged at her sleeve, but it was too late. The confession, once whispered in our living room, now spilled into the courtroom for all to hear. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through the air, leaned forward. "Mrs. Gray, what you did was more than theft. You forged government documents. You denied a veteran his rightful treatment. You betrayed your neighbors, your community, and the memory of your own husband. This court has no choice but to act." The sentencing came swift and clear. 22 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised probation, restitution of $315,000, and you are permanently barred from managing finances or holding any position of trust in any association. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder. Leah's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman who had screamed orders across the street, who had called police at the sight of boxes. She looked like what she was, exposed, defeated, undone by her own lies. When the marshals led her away, the neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just sat in silence, letting the weight of justice settle in the room. Maria touched Sophia's hand on the way out. "Thank you," she whispered, for giving Diego back his voice. That night, as we drove home, the lights of Willow Creek came into view. For the first time since we'd moved in, they didn't feel like watchful eyes or silent threats. They felt like home. Sophia sat beside me, her gaze out the window, the faintest smile on her lips. "It's over," she said. And for the first time, I believed her. The weeks after Leah's sentencing felt strangely quiet. Not the uneasy quiet that had hung over Willow Creek before, the kind that crackled with tension, like storm clouds building overhead. No, this was a softer silence, a peace settling back over the neighborhood. Leah's house went dark almost overnight. The blinds stayed closed, the driveway empty. For years, that porch had been the command post of her kingdom, where she barked orders and glared at anyone who stepped out of line. Now, it was just another house, silent, hollow, waiting for its next chapter. The HOA board wasted no time. Harold was voted in as president, unanimously. No shouting, no campaigning, no power plays. Just a simple agreement among neighbors that he was the man for the job. His first act was symbolic but powerful. He opened the books. On a cool Saturday morning, we gathered in the clubhouse. Harold rolled in a cart stacked with binders and receipts. Every dollar accounted for. "From now on," he said, "this association belongs to the community, not one person's pocket." People clapped, but more than that, they exhaled. You could see shoulders uncoil, jaws unclench. Transparency was like fresh air. Sophia, for her part, became something of a local hero, though she never asked for it. Folks started stopping by just to thank her. Some brought pies, others flowers. One older veteran left a folded flag on our porch with a simple note, "For Major Bowman, who fought without firing a shot." She took it all with quiet grace, though at night, when it was just the two of us, she'd shake her head. "I didn't do anything special," she'd say. But I knew better. She had stared down corruption and refused to blink. That kind of courage doesn't go unnoticed. The most moving change came when Maria Morgan returned. She carried a small box of Diego's things, photos, medals, letters he'd written. Together, with Harold's guidance and the neighbors' hands, we built something lasting, a memorial garden. It started with a patch of bare ground near the clubhouse, nothing but dirt and weeds. But over the weeks, it transformed. Roses, lilies, and wildflowers took root. A bench was placed under the oak tree, and a stone marker was set in the ground, etched with words chosen by Maria herself. "In memory of Sergeant Diego Morgan. His fight lives on in those who choose truth." The day we dedicated it, the entire neighborhood turned out. Children placed small flags in the soil. Veterans stood in silence, some saluting, others bowing their heads. Maria spoke briefly, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. "My brother was taken from us too soon, but today I see something he always hoped for, that people would stand together, stronger than fear, stronger than lies." The wind stirred the flowers as if Diego himself were listening. As weeks turned into months, Willow Creek changed in ways I hadn't thought possible. The HOA stopped being a weapon and became what it was meant to be, a tool for the community. Budgets were trimmed, fees lowered, projects approved with real votes. People who had once whispered behind curtains now chatted freely on sidewalks. And me? I finally felt like I belonged. No more wary glances across the street, no more waiting for the next knock on the door. Our home was ours, truly and completely. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the garden glowed gold, Sophia and I sat on the bench beneath Diego's memorial oak. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since we moved in, I felt at peace. "It's funny," I said, breaking the silence, "how one woman's lies almost tore this place apart." Sophia tilted her head, her eyes thoughtful. "Lies always crumble, Dean. It just takes someone willing to shine a light." I squeezed her hand, grateful that light had been her. Across the garden, Harold was locking up the clubhouse, the weight of leadership carried not with pride, but with humility. Maria knelt by the flowers, brushing her fingers across the stone. Neighbors lingered, laughing softly, their voices blending with the chirp of crickets. Willow Creek had been scarred, yes, but in those scars, something stronger had grown, something honest. And as I watched the sun fade over the rooftops, I realized the truth. Sometimes justice doesn't come in grand explosions or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it comes in a garden, in neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder, in a salute offered with quiet respect. The storm had passed, and at long last, Willow Creek could breathe again. If Leah Gray's sentencing closed one chapter for Willow Creek, it opened another for Sophia. The VA didn't just thank her, they noticed her. Within weeks, her supervisor called with a new assignment. Not paperwork, not routine case reviews. They wanted her on the hard files, the ones no one else wanted to touch. Fraud, forgery, cases with shadows behind them. At first, Sophia didn't tell me the details. She'd come home late, shoulders heavy, her hands still carrying the faint smell of old paper and ink. She'd push her dinner around on the plate, then excuse herself to the study. The lamp would burn until past midnight, just like it had before. One night, I followed her upstairs, quiet, just to stand in the doorway. She didn't see me right away. She was bent over a file, lips pressed tight, brow furrowed in that way she had when she was wrestling with something ugly. On her desk were photos, rows of medals, some with tags, some still in velvet cases, names scrawled beneath them. Beside the photos lay copies of signatures, each one slightly different, like someone had tried to imitate the same hand again and again. She rubbed her temples, sighed, then finally looked up. "Dean," she said softly, "it's not just Leah, not even close." That's when she told me. Across the country there were cases, veterans whose benefits had vanished into thin air, families who'd applied for help, only to be told their paperwork never existed. Medals that had been cataloged, then mysteriously disappeared from archives. Leah's fraud wasn't an isolated act of greed. It was part of a pattern too clean to be coincidence. I walked in, set a cup of coffee by her hand, and sat down across from her. "So, they're sending all of this to you now?" She nodded. "Because of Diego's case." Because I didn't back down. I studied her face in the lamplight. She was strong, always had been, but strength doesn't mean unbreakable. I saw the lines around her eyes deepen, the way she carried other people's pain like it was her own. "Don't let them bury you under this," I said gently. She smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes justice isn't about winning, Dean. Sometimes it's just about showing up, so the truth has a fighting chance." In Willow Creek, folks began treating her differently. They waved when she walked Max. They stopped her in the grocery store to thank her. At the memorial garden, more than once, I saw someone sit beside her on the bench, whisper their story, and leave lighter than when they came. She didn't ask for it, but Sophia had become something more than a neighbor. She was a kind of anchor. But anchors, I knew, carry weight. One Saturday morning, as we were trimming hedges, Harold stopped by. He leaned on the fence, his eyes serious. "I've been looking into Leah's accounts," he said. "There's something odd. Some of her payments didn't just vanish into gambling sites. A few transfers went through shell companies in Nevada, even one in Delaware. It's bigger than just one woman playing cards online." Sophia froze, hedge clippers in hand. "Shell companies?" Harold nodded. "Sloppy, but there's a trail, and I don't think Leah was the one smart enough to set it up. Somebody helped her, or used her." The words hung in the air like a chill wind. That night, Sophia pored over the files with renewed focus. I stayed beside her, not saying much, just listening as she muttered about dates, amounts, and names. She was connecting dots that stretched far beyond our quiet neighborhood. At one point, she closed the folder and looked at me, her voice low. "Dean, what if Leah wasn't the mastermind? What if she was just another pawn?" I didn't answer right away. The thought had been gnawing at me too. Leah had been reckless, greedy, cruel, but sophisticated fraud, interstate shell games, that smelled of something larger. I reached over, took her hand. "Then maybe you're on the trail of something that's still out there." She squeezed my hand back, her grip firm. "Which means we're not done." The truth is, I worried. Every day I worried. Not about Leah anymore. She was behind bars. But about what Sophia was stepping into. Fraud that touched veteran families across the country wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, silence. And I knew from Diego's case, silence was the one thing she'd never accept. Weeks later, at the memorial garden, I watched her lay fresh flowers beneath Diego's stone. Maria stood nearby, her hands folded, her eyes filled with gratitude. A few neighbors lingered, children playing tag between the benches. Life had returned to Willow Creek, but I could feel it. Sophia's burden was only growing. As we walked home, she slipped her arm through mine. "Dean," she said quietly, "if Leah was connected to something larger, then Diego wasn't the only one. There are others. Families still suffering. Files still missing." I looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deep. "And you're going to be the one to find them." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was its own vow. That night, as the lamp burned late once again, I stood in the doorway and realized something. Leah Gray had been the storm over Willow Creek, but beyond her, there were darker clouds on the horizon. And Sophia, my wife, my anchor, was already walking straight into them. The burden of truth had become hers to carry, and though I'd stand with her, I knew it came with a price. Because the deeper you dig into shadows, the more likely the shadows start digging back. It's strange how quickly a neighborhood can change. Months passed, and Willow Creek looked nothing like the place we had first moved into. The gardens bloomed again, the sidewalks felt safe, and the clubhouse, once Leah's pulpit of control, now echoed with laughter from potlucks and community meetings. Harold ran things with fairness and transparency. For the first time, people trusted the board. Sophia, though, carried herself differently. Stronger, sharper, more focused. The VA gave her more cases, each one darker than the last. She never bragged, never sought attention, but word spread. Folks whispered her name with respect. "Major Bowman," they'd say, almost like a title of honor. At the memorial garden, children often placed flowers by Diego's stone without being asked. Maria would smile through her tears, telling them stories of her brother's courage. That garden had become the heart of Willow Creek. Proof that truth could take root even after betrayal. But with every victory, new shadows emerged. One evening, Sophia returned home later than usual. She set her bag down, exhaustion etched into her face. I poured her a glass of water, and she sat at the table, silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Dean, Leah's fraud was just the surface. These shell companies, Nevada, Delaware, they tie into cases across 3 states. It's systematic. It's deliberate." I leaned back, the chill running down my spine. "And they know you're digging?" She looked at me then, her eyes steady but tired. "They will soon." We didn't talk much after that. Some truths don't need more words. In the weeks that followed, small things began to happen. A car parked too long across the street. A call on our landline with silence on the other end. The kind of details most people would dismiss, but not Sophia. Not me. We'd seen enough to know the difference between coincidence and warning. Still, life went on. Neighbors waved when I fetched the mail. Harold dropped by for coffee, always bringing a new story from his reserve shifts. Maria hosted dinners, laughter echoing through her home once again. On the surface, peace had returned, and yet, beneath it, I could feel the weight of something larger stirring. The night before Sophia left for a conference in Washington, we sat in the memorial garden. The air was cool, the roses heavy with bloom. She rested her hand on mine, quiet for a long while. "Dean," she said softly, "no matter how deep the lies go, truth always finds its way up. Always. I nodded, though part of me wished the fight could end right there, in that garden, with nothing more than the sound of crickets and the rustle of leaves. The next morning, as she drove off toward the airport, I stood on the porch watching her taillights fade. Max pressed against my leg, whining low, as if he felt it too, that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I glanced across the street then. Leah's old house had finally sold. The new owners hadn't moved in yet, but a single light burned in an upstairs window. Too steady, too deliberate. I narrowed my eyes, a knot tightening in my gut. Willow Creek had survived one storm. But somewhere out there, darker clouds were gathering again. And this time, the fight wouldn't just be about a crooked neighbor or stolen money. It would be about something far bigger, something that wanted silence. And as I stood there, the words Sophia had spoken the night before echoed in my mind like a promise or a warning. The truth always surfaces,